What defines a good country? Is it wealth? Is it beauty? Or is it something more intangible, something you can only feel in the air? Now, consider a nation with more proven oil reserves than Saudi Arabia, home to the world's tallest waterfall, and a coastline kissed by the Caribbean. On paper, this is a paradise in waiting, a titan of prosperity. But what if I told you this same country is where a monthly minimum wage struggles to buy a single block of cheese, where doctors with years of training earn less than someone driving a taxi, and where the currency has collapsed so catastrophically that the government has had to surgically remove 14 zeros from it over the years just to make it usable? This is the grand, heartbreaking paradox of Venezuela. This journey isn't about what you see on the surface, it's about understanding how a nation can be simultaneously one of the richest and poorest places on Earth. Let's unravel this story together. Welcome to Caracas. From the air, the city sprawls across a lush, impossibly green valley, a stunning spectacle nestled between the mountains of the Cordillera de la Costa. It feels alive, vibrant. But once you touch down and the cabin door opens, the reality of Venezuela hits you, not as a sight, but as a series of lessons in survival. The first lesson is patience, a virtue born not of choice, but of necessity. You see it in the ghostly, serpentine lines of cars, sometimes stretching for miles, waiting for gasoline. This isn't a temporary shortage, it's a permanent feature of the landscape. In a nation literally floating on an ocean of oil, this is the first, most jarring contradiction. People park their cars and sleep in them overnight, playing cards, talking, waiting. It's a daily ritual of uncertainty, a testament to a system that has fundamentally broken down. The chaos isn't just at the gas pump. It's in your pocket, in every transaction. The official currency is the bolivar, but its story is one of a spectacular, world record-setting collapse. Imagine needing a backpack full of cash just to buy a week's groceries. This isn't an exaggeration, it was the reality during the peak of hyperinflation. The government, in a desperate attempt to make the currency psychologically usable, has performed monetary surgery several times. In 2008, 3 zeros were removed. In 2018, another 5, in 2021, 6 more. A total of 14 zeros gone. To put that in perspective, a single $1 bill today would have been worth 100 trillion of the old, pre-2008 bolivars. Even the Syrian pound, the currency of a nation ravaged by over a decade of brutal civil war, holds more value. This economic implosion poisons every aspect of daily life. The government, unable to secure foreign currency through a functioning economy, resorted to the only tool it had left: printing more money. This poured jet fuel on the fire of inflation. At its peak in 2018, the International Monetary Fund estimated it would hit 10,000%. While the official rate has since come down, it remains one of the highest in the world. This creates absurdities. A simple block of imported cheese can cost 25. This, in a country where the official monthly minimum wage hovers around the equivalent of $5. While various government bonuses might push an average worker's take-home pay to about $70 a month, families consistently report that they need a bare minimum of $500 simply to cover food, rent, and transport. The math just doesn't work. The formal banking system has become a relic. Legally, you might be able to withdraw the equivalent of $3 per week from an ATM. But that's a purely theoretical exercise. First, you have to find an ATM. Then, you have to find one that's actually working. And finally, you have to find one that has any cash in it. Trust in local banks is non-existent. So, how does anyone buy anything? The country survives on a shadow economy, an unofficial but universally accepted system of dollarization. Cash is king, specifically US dollar cash. Travelers are advised to bring as much as they can physically carry. But even this creates its own set of bizarre problems. Try to pay for a 3 coffee with a 10 bill. The vendor will likely just shrug. No tengo cambio. I don't have change. The scarcity of small denomination US bills paralyzes commerce. In this broken system, people innovate to survive. Go to a nice restaurant in the affluent districts of Caracas like Las Mercedes, and at the end of $100 meal, you won't see a credit card machine. Instead, you'll open a banking app on your phone, likely Zelle or a similar platform. The restaurant owner also has one. You'll transfer $100 from your bank account, located in Miami or Panama, directly to theirs. Many middle-class families who have remained in Venezuela survive because they have relatives abroad who help them maintain these foreign accounts, or they work for international companies that pay in dollars. It's a digital lifeline that completely bypasses the Venezuelan government, its worthless currency, and its failed banking system. But this creates a stark, two-tiered society: those with access to dollars, who can shop at imported goods stores called bodegones, and the vast majority who do not, left to navigate the wreckage of the Bolivar economy. But how did it come to this? This isn't a country that has always been poor. Far from it. How does a nation that, just a few decades ago, was the richest and most stable democracy in Latin America, a beacon of modernity, fall into such a deep, dark abyss? To understand, we have to talk about oil. And to talk about oil, we have to understand the legacy of Hugo Chavez. Venezuela was not always a basket case. In the 1970s, during the global oil boom, it was nicknamed Saudi Venezuela. The influx of petrodollars was staggering. It funded gleaming skyscrapers, the first country in South America to have a color television network, modern highways, and a thriving, sophisticated middle class. People from Italy, Spain, Portugal, and other parts of Latin America migrated to Venezuela in search of opportunity. But this glittering prosperity was built on a fragile, treacherous foundation: the price of a single commodity. Unknowingly, Venezuela had developed a severe case of Dutch disease. Imagine your family has one child who becomes a superstar athlete earning millions. It's fantastic. But soon, no one else bothers to learn a trade or go to university. The family stops growing its own food in the garden because it's easier to just buy everything from the most expensive store. Then, one day, the athlete suffers a career-ending injury. The family's income vanishes overnight, and they've forgotten how to do anything else for themselves. This is Dutch disease. Venezuela's oil wealth made its currency so strong that it became cheaper to import everything: food, clothes, cars, than to produce it locally. Its agricultural and industrial sectors, once robust, withered and died. The entire national economy became a hostage to the volatile price of oil. When Hugo Chavez, a charismatic former paratrooper, came to power in 1999, he inherited this deeply flawed petrostate. He rode a wave of popular anger from the poor majority, who felt they had been left behind during the boom years. His Bolivarian Revolution, named after the liberation hero Simón Bolívar, promised to finally use Venezuela's immense oil wealth to uplift the masses. And for a time, fueled by a historic surge in oil prices in the 2000s, it seemed to work. He launched massive social programs called Misiones. Misión Barrio Adentro brought tens of thousands of Cuban doctors into the poorest slums. Misión Robinson launched a nationwide literacy campaign. He provided subsidized food through state-run stores. He took from the rich and gave to the poor, and for that, the poor majority adored him, electing him time and time again. But behind the social spending, he was systematically dismantling the country's remaining productive capacity. In the name of socialism, he went on a spree of nationalizations. He seized foreign-owned cement plants, telecommunication companies, and electric utilities. He expropriated thousands of private farms and cattle ranches, handing them over to state-run cooperatives that quickly fell into disrepair due to mismanagement and corruption. Venezuela, a country with vast fertile land, became almost entirely dependent on importing its food. He declared an economic war on the private sector and the nation's wealthy elite. "If you have your brands," he famously challenged, "we have our oil." The country's professional and business class saw the writing on the wall. Facing threats of expropriation and a government that viewed them as the enemy, they began a quiet exodus. This was the original brain drain. Doctors, engineers, university professors, and entrepreneurs packed their bags. This created a vacuum of expertise that would cripple the country for years to come. By the time Chavez died of cancer in 2013, he left behind a nation more dependent on oil than ever before, a hollowed-out economy, and a deeply polarized society. He had won the political battles, but he had set the stage for a catastrophic economic defeat. After Chavez, his hand-picked successor, Nicolas Maduro, a former bus driver and union leader, took the helm. If Chavez had built the house of cards, Maduro's tenure was the gust of wind that brought it all down. The price of oil, which had miraculously propped up Chavez's lavish spending, crashed in 2014, and the entire economic model imploded. The government, deprived of its primary income source, had no answers other than to print more money, blame its enemies, and tighten its authoritarian grip. This is where the international dimension becomes absolutely crucial to understanding modern Venezuela. As Maduro's government cracked down on dissent, jailed political opponents, and held elections widely condemned as fraudulent, the United States responded with a series of escalating sanctions. These weren't just a vague embargo, they were targeted and surgical. The most significant blow came in 2017, when the Trump administration sanctioned Venezuela's ability to issue new debt, and then in 2019, when it imposed devastating sanctions on the state-owned oil company, PDVSA. This was a shot to the jugular. These sanctions effectively locked Venezuela out of the U.S. financial system, which had always been its primary market and the hub for its transactions. It could no longer easily sell its crude oil or import the vital diluents and equipment needed to process its heavy, tar-like crude. The Maduro government blames these sanctions, which it calls an economic blockade, for all of the country's woes. And there is no question that they have been devastating, dramatically accelerating the collapse of the oil industry. Production plummeted from over 3 million barrels a day in the late 90s to, at its lowest point, under 400,000. On the other hand, a vast number of economists and opposition figures argue that the sanctions were merely the final blow to an industry already hollowed out by years of chronic underinvestment, corruption, and the firing of thousands of skilled engineers by Chavez. The rot, they argue, had set in long before the harshest sanctions were ever conceived. The political scene descended into a surreal stalemate. In January 2019, citing articles in the Constitution, the young leader of the opposition, controlled National Assembly, Juan Guaidó, declared himself the interim president of Venezuela, arguing Maduro's presidency was illegitimate. He was almost immediately recognized by the United States, Canada, the European Union, and most of Latin America. For a time, Venezuela had two men claiming to be president, creating a political paralysis that froze the nation. However, Guaido's movement ultimately failed to dislodge Maduro, crucially because he never won the support of the military's high command. But Venezuela was not left entirely alone on the world stage. As the West isolated Maduro, other global powers saw a strategic opening. China, which had loaned Venezuela over $50 billion during the boom years, continued to be a key economic partner, accepting oil shipments as repayment for its massive debts. And Russia saw a golden opportunity to poke its rival, the United States, in its own backyard. It became one of Maduro's most important political and military backers, providing loans, weapons, technical advisors for the oil fields, and a crucial diplomatic shield at the United Nations Security Council. Venezuela's crisis was no longer just a domestic tragedy. It had become a pawn on a global geopolitical chessboard, a flashpoint for the rivalry between the US, Russia, and China. In this high-stakes game, the 28 million Venezuelan people were the ones paying the ultimate price. The cumulative effect of this decade-long political and economic collapse has been a human tragedy of epic proportions. According to the United Nations, over 7.7 million Venezuelans have now fled their country. This is the largest refugee and migrant crisis in the recent history of the Western Hemisphere, larger than Syria's in absolute numbers. It is a quiet, sprawling exodus, not from the bombs of a conventional war, but from the slow, grinding war of hunger, collapsed services, and utter hopelessness. You see them all across the Americas. They are the caminantes, the walkers, trekking thousands of miles on foot with little more than a small suitcase and the hope of a better life. They cross the Andes into Colombia, move south to Peru and Chile, or head north, facing the terrifying, lawless jungle of the Darien Gap between Colombia and Panama on their perilous journey towards the United States. They are the doctors and engineers driving for Uber in Lima, the teachers washing dishes in Bogota, the once middle-class families living in makeshift camps in Brazil. This mass migration has put an immense strain on neighboring countries, testing the limits of their hospitality, their economies, and their social services. For those who remain in Venezuela, the social fabric has frayed to the breaking point. When the state fails, order breaks down. The country now has one of the highest violent crime rates in the world. In certain sprawling barrios of Caracas, like Petare, one of the largest slums in Latin America, life is dictated not by the police, but by the rule of heavily armed gangs known as colectivos. It's said to be more perilous than the favelas of Brazil. In these areas, there's an unwritten rule: you do not stop at red lights, especially at night. The risk of being carjacked, robbed, or kidnapped is simply too high when your vehicle is stationary. The police know this. They often won't fine you for it. It's a terrifying, tacit admission that the state can no longer guarantee the most basic level of security for its citizens. The public health system has imploded. Hospitals function without reliable electricity or running water. Patients are often required to bring their own basic supplies: syringes, bandages, antibiotics, even surgical gloves for the doctors. Diseases that were once eradicated, like measles, diphtheria, and malaria, have returned with a vengeance. The trauma is profound. In 2019, a series of nationwide blackouts plunged the country into total darkness for days on end. It was a glimpse into a complete societal collapse, and the psychological scars of that period run deep. The faces you see on the streets of Caracas often carry a visible weight of exhaustion and sadness. A silent, collective depression hangs heavy in the humid Caribbean air. Yet, to paint Venezuela as only a place of tragedy and decay would be to miss the full, complex story. Because even amidst the ruins of the state, the Venezuelan spirit, in its own stubborn way, endures. And the country's natural beauty remains a breathtaking, almost defiant, constant. Deep in the remote jungles of the Guyana highlands lies Angel Falls, or Caripacupay Mer in the local Pemen language. It's the world's tallest, uninterrupted waterfall, cascading nearly a full kilometer from the top of a massive, sheer top mountain called an Ayan Tepui. To visit it is an epic journey, requiring a small plane flight to the indigenous village of Canema, a multi-day boat trip up a winding river, and a trek through a primordial jungle. It is difficult and expensive to reach, a world entirely removed from the chaos of the cities. For those who make the journey, it's a powerful, humbling reminder of a world that exists beyond politics and economics. This landscape is so otherworldly that it directly inspired Paradise Falls in the Pixar movie Up. And then there are the people. Despite everything they have endured, Venezuelans are known for their warmth, their dark humor, and their incredible resilience. You see it in the cultural institutions that refuse to die. El Sistema, the world-renowned public music education program founded in 1975, has continued to function against all odds, teaching classical music to hundreds of thousands of children in poor communities and producing world-class musicians like the conductor Gustavo Dudamel. It stands as a powerful symbol of defiance through art. Venezuela is a land of profound, gut-wrenching ironies. It is a place where you can witness the most spectacular natural beauty in the morning and the most desperate human struggle in the afternoon. It is a nation of immense, unimaginable wealth that cannot feed its people. It is home to some of the most generous, open-hearted people you will ever meet, living in one of the most dangerous societies on the planet. This is not a simple story of failure. It is a complex, heartbreaking, and deeply human cautionary tale about what happens when political ideology trumps pragmatism, when a nation bets its entire future on a single resource, and when its people are caught in the tragic crossfire of world powers. Venezuela is more than just a destination. It's a profound and living lesson in history, economics, and the staggering resilience of the human spirit. It shows how quickly prosperity can vanish when its foundations are weak, and how stubbornly life and beauty can persist in the face of unimaginable adversity. It forces you to ask difficult questions about wealth, governance, and the true meaning of a nation's well-being. What part of Venezuela's complex story surprised you the most? Share your thoughts or any questions you have in the comments below. We read every one of them. If this journey opened up a new perspective for you, consider sharing this video with a fellow traveler who also loves to look deeper than the postcard view. Subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most fascinating and misunderstood places. And if you're curious to explore another nation's hidden story, check out our video exploring another of the world's most complex countries. Thank you for exploring with us. See you on the next journey.